Good morning. Wanted to share something with you. It comes from the book of Matthew, the 5th chapter, and the 29th and the 30th verses. And Jesus is into the Sermon on the Mount, probably one of the biggest collection of knowledge bombs ever assembled in the history of mankind. And these two verses, they talk about how if your right eye offends you, pluck it out, cast it into the fire, because it's better for you to lose one of your members than your whole body be cast into hell. Then he repeats it with a different body part in the 30th verse, and he says, if your right hand offends you, to cut it out and cast it into the fire, because it's better for you to lose one of your members than your whole body be cast into hell. And I've always thought that this verse really centered around self-control, the idea that, watch what you're looking at, watch what you're putting your hands on, both figuratively and literally, so that you don't cause yourself to sin and to quote unquote be cast into hell. But I started thinking about the importance of the right hand, and that 70 to 95% of us are what we call right hand dominant, meaning, everything you do that's complex, from carrying heavy objects to writing your name to wielding a hammer, is done with your right hand. And how important is your right hand to you? And then with a little further research, I looked up something that they call ocular dominance. This idea that your mind prefers visual input from one eye over the other, and that about 2/3 of all humans are right eye dominant. Meaning that when you're focusing on something, your mind is going to have your right eye do most of the work because it prefers how your right eye looks at things. So I think that what Jesus was kind of breaking down to us is that no matter how vital or how important something is to you, right? If it causes you to offend. Now let's look at that word offend. That word offend comes from the Greek word scandalizo, which means to scandalize, but it also means to stumble, to entrap, to trip up, to entice one to sin, or to entice one to miss the mark. Where your mark is your aim. It's what you're pushing towards, what you're moving towards. As Paul says, we press toward the mark of the high calling of Christ Jesus. So it's this idea, when you tie all of that together and you think about how much your life would change if you lost your right hand. If you're right-handed and you lost your right hand, you would have a huge period of adjustment. You'd have to learn how to write again. You got to learn how to lift stuff with your left hand, how to do complex procedures. Whatever your job was, you got to do it with your left hand now. It's going to affect how even you drive your car, you shake hands and interact with people, how you type on a computer. Now, if you were right eye dominant and you had to pluck out your right eye or lose your right eye, it's going to affect your brain. Your brain's going to have to learn how to interpret things from your other eye. It's going to change how you see the entire world around you, let alone your depth perception is going to change. You're going to lose your depth perception, and you're going to have to find a different way to determine how far something is from you or how close you are to something. So what Jesus is saying is, no matter how important something is, no matter how big of an adjustment your life would be if you lost it, no matter how you'd have to look at the world differently if you had to remove something, no matter how much it would change you and change your daily life to have to get rid of something, if it is causing you to stumble on this road toward the mark, toward the purpose, toward your goal, toward who God created you to be, if it's causing you to stumble and fall, if it is holding you back in your growth in God, if it is stopping you from being the person that you were made to be, whatever it is, it's better that you get rid of it than to lose your race, to lose your run, to not finish your course, to stop pressing toward the mark which God has created you to be. Remember, God formed you in your mother's womb and wrote down all your days of your life. That means he wrote down your purpose. He wrote down the goals of your life. He wrote down who he was going to create you to be before you even had one day outside of your mother. And if anything in your life, and if anyone in your life trips you up on fulfilling that purpose, on being who you're supposed to be, it is better that you learn to live life without it and without them than to not live the God-created life you were meant to live. Something to think about.